Welcome, Buckeye fans, to another episode of Buckeye Rising. I'm your host, Ace, and I'm here to take you beyond the box score to break down the whys and the hows of the game. We just witnessed the Buckeyes' first road test of the season and their Big Ten opener against Washington. This was a gritty, dominant performance in the end, with the number one Buckeyes taking down the Huskies 24-6 at a raucous Husky Stadium. This win snaps Washington's long home winning streak of 22 games and gives the Buckeyes a massive boost of confidence. So let's get ready to kick off. This is Buckeye Rising. All right, first off, we're going to look at the offensive side of the ball. The Washington defense really came out swinging, but the Buckeyes made some great adjustments. So let's start with the quarterback, Julian Sayin. I would say Julian faced another big challenge of his young career in his first road start, and he was the definition of poised. The stat line will show 22 of 28 for passing and 208 yards for 2 touchdowns, which is incredibly efficient. But the key was his composure in the face of a very fierce Washington pass rush. I'm specifically talking about that 3rd and 11 that was late in the first half, where he sidestepped what was essentially a 7-man blitz and found Jeremiah Smith for that 18-yard touchdown. That wasn't just a physical play. It was a masterful display of pocket management and mental fortitude that really gave the Buckeyes their first lead and completely changed the energy of the game. All right, let's talk playmakers. The running backs were the unsung heroes of this offense. Bo Jackson led the way with 17 carries for 80 yards, and the 1-2 punch with him and C.J. Donaldson, who had 9 carries and 39 yards for at least 1 rushing touchdown, was crucial, especially in the second half. The Buckeyes finished with 149 rushing yards, and they controlled the clock for over 31 minutes. This shows that the offensive line, which did struggle initially, really leaned into the ground game and ultimately wore down that Washington defense. This was a physical statement, and it was the backbone of the win. Now it's time to shine a little light on the special teams unit. This had a major turning point for better and for worse. Let's talk about the 2 massive swings in momentum in the first half that directly involved special teams. First, there's the negative. Brandon Ennis had a huge punt return, looked great, but then there was the fumble he gave up to Washington that gave them the ball right inside the 30. You just can't have those turnovers. However, the biggest special teams call of the game was from Washington's failed fake field goal. They were only down 3-0 in the second quarter and decided to run a fake, but the pass sailed incomplete. The defense read it all the way. Had Washington scored a touchdown there, it's a completely different game. But the defensive special teams held strong on that play, and it was a massive win overall for the special teams unit and the entire team. The defense stood strong over and over again today. This unit was nothing short of dominant. It held Washington's offense that was averaging over 55 points per game to only 6. The defensive MVP I have are co-MVPs, and they have to be the defensive ends. Caden Curry and Caden McDonald, the pressure they generated was relentless. Washington's QB was sacked a season-high 6 times, and Curry in particular was everywhere, tying Ohio State record with 5 tackles for loss. This wasn't just a 1 or 2 big plays. This was sustained 4-quarter domination. They completely took Washington's running back out of the game, limited him to just 70 yards, and that forced the Huskies into these impossible 3rd and long situations. The defensive strategy against Washington's short pass game was flawless. Matt Patricia had the Buckeyes playing a lot of tight man coverage and really trusted the corners and bringing pressure from the edge to collapse the pocket. Washington was held to an abysmal 1 for 11 on third down conversions. And that statistic, I believe, tells the whole story. The defensive line was winning, the linebackers were cleaning up the messes, and the secondary was on lockdown. They didn't just bend and not break, they straight up didn't even bend. They forced Washington to settle for only 2 short field goals after they got inside the 30-yard line on 3 separate drives. Let's discuss the coaches' calls. We're breaking down the most important calls of the game, the ones that were made by Coach Day and his staff. The first big call of the game, and it is a little bit of a debatable one, was in the first quarter on 4th and 1 at the Washington 5-yard line. Here, Day decided to go for it and was completely stuffed. While I appreciate the aggressive mindset in a tough road environment, getting on the board first with those 3 points would have been a much safer and more prudent call, especially with the offense still finding its rhythm. However, I have to give credit to Day. He showed great trust in his offense later in the game. His second half management, especially that long 14-play, 75-yard drive for CJ Donaldson's touchdown, was a masterful blend of power football and ball control that chewed up over 7 minutes of the clock and really helped put the game away. The coaching call that really sealed the game was the touchdown to CJ Donaldson late in the fourth quarter. We were already up 17-6, and Coach Day had a choice on 4th and 1 again from the Washington 3-yard line. He could have kicked the field goal, but he went for the dagger. Sayin's quick slant to Donaldson for the score was a high percentage throw, but it was still an aggressive call that showed confidence in the players and that offensive line. That was the perfect final punch that ended Washington's home streak and cemented the win. And that was really the game. But before we go, here's my extra point. The biggest takeaway from this game is that the Ohio State defense is truly a championship caliber defense. They traveled across the country and shut down a top scoring offense, and they proved that they are an elite unit that they've been hyped up to be. If the offense can clean up some of these slow starts, this team could genuinely be a national championship contender. My rising star of the week has to be Lorenzo Styles Jr., the veteran corner. The defensive line will get all the headlines for the many sacks, but it was Styles Jr. who was critical to shutting down the Washington pass game on the back end. Washington QB DeMond Williams Jr. was incredibly efficient. He completed over 80% of his passes. But Styles Jr. took away some of the big plays that came to his zone, and he had key tackles in open space that prevented many of the first downs and forced Washington into their dismal 1 for 11 third down conversion rate. If you go watch the tape, he was physically excellent in his coverage, and his tackling was disciplined. That kind of lockdown play is what allows the defensive line to hunt, and it's why he's my rising star of the week. Well, that's it for this week's episode of Buckeye Rising. Let's meet up for the review of 4 Points Friday. Thank you for tuning in and rising with me. We'll be back next week to break down the game against Minnesota. Until then, OHIO, go Bucks.